Oh my God, I just roasted my favorite coffee, same profile as ever. I brew it the same way as ever, but it tastes completely different. Do you know this feeling? Well, the reason for that is likely not your roasting skills, but the natural product that you put in your roaster, especially the moisture content and or water activity of the green coffee beans you have used. And this is why we are going to have a look at these two factors, so moisture content and water activity in green coffee beans in this video, what it is and why it's relevant for you. I'm Ingo from Roast Rebels and now let's go. So as said in the intro, in this video we're going to have a look at moisture content and water activity in green coffee beans, what it is and why it's relevant for you. I will do another video then following to this one where I'm going to compare some devices to measure that. So if this is something that you're interested in, then have a look at the link here. It might be released in a couple of days after this video. So maybe when you're watching this video, it's already online. But in this video, it's more than really about the concept and the theory behind it. So let's start with the first one, and this is moisture content of coffee. Moisture content is probably quite easy to understand. So if you have a look at the green coffee beans, there is some mass of the coffee material, but also in a green coffee bean, you always have water particles inside. So usually around 11% of your green coffee beans is water. You can measure moisture content actually not only for green coffee beans, you can then also measure it for the whole cherries, for parchment, which is kind of the dried cherries, for green coffee beans, for roasted coffees. So if you're a coffee producer, then the factors, especially like the cherries or parchment, might be of interest for you. But when you're then a roaster, a roastery or a green coffee trader, it's mainly about green coffee beans where we are going to measure the moisture content. So for you to understand about the cherries we've been talking before, so green coffee or coffee in general is not a bean, you might know that already. It is a seed that is being grown inside of a cherry, and when it's inside of this cherry, it will have about 45 to 55% of water. So it's quite humid products that you have in this cherry. And then in the processing, the coffee beans or the seeds are going to be dried down to about 11% of moisture content. So when it's going to leave the farm, it usually is in that range. So it can be about something between 10 and 12%, which is kind of the best practice that we have in coffee trading. So moisture content is then the water that you have in the green coffee beans. And as I said, in this range between 10 and 12%, we say usually the coffee is safe. If you are then higher than this, you are going to run into the risk of having mold coffee, because then bacteria can grow in the coffee, and not only the taste is going to be really unpleasant, it's also really then a health issue. And this is why if you're a green coffee trader or if you're a roastery, you always have to then measure the moisture content of your green coffee beans when you receive it from your producers, your traders. So we, for example, are always measuring then moisture content, density, and water activity. It's quite rarely that something is happening, but we already have received in the past coffee where we had 13.5% of moisture content, and then we had to go back to the seller and say, hey, I'm really sorry, but we cannot accept this coffee because we cannot do anything with it. It's mold, it's not safe to use. And then the seller usually have to take the coffee back. On the other hand, if the coffee has not enough, so if it's below 9%, let's say about 8% of moisture in the coffee, then you don't have a health risk. So it's not going to be dangerous. So you can still roast the coffee, but you might then likely have a quality risk when it comes to the sensory of the coffee. So when the coffee is too dry, this often leads then to taste flavors of like hay or taste notes that are then similar to baked coffee, so a bit unpleasant coffee, and the coffee might be aging a bit too fast. So look that you're in the range of 10 to 12%. Also something maybe more for negotiations to take into consideration. Of course, if you have a higher moisture content in your coffee, then you're going to buy more water. So it can make a little bit of a difference if you have 10% or 12%. It's already 2% of water that you're more buying and that you're going then to evaporate and lose before having then the roasted coffee. But actually, in practical use, this is usually not something where you then complain. You're really going to complain if the moisture content is much higher, or maybe also if it's below the usual thresholds that we have in coffee trading. One thing that is also important for you to understand is that you really have to be careful in the way you are storing the coffee. So if you look, for example, we are using this Ecotact bag. There are some producers like Ecotact, GrainPro is very famous as well. There are also other producers. And although I'm not really 100% happy with the environmental impact of a packaging like this, but on the other hand, it's still just the best packaging for green coffee beans, because it's protecting them not only from smells or from insects, pests, but also then it protects the moisture content of your green coffee beans, as well as the water activity, which is something that we are going to talk about soon. But this is really a fantastic protection for your coffee. And when you're buying green coffee beans in bags, you might have seen it before. I hope that actually you always get this information from your trader, where you then see how your coffee is packed. So the usual packaging for coffee are these burlap packs, but especially when you go into specialty coffee, better qualities, then the coffee has to be coming in so-called GrainPro or Ecotact bags, which is then often within this burlap pack another layer of then these plastic packs, which is really protecting the coffee. So as I said, it's on one hand smells like from other goods that can influence the coffee if you then have the coffee just in burlap packs or anything other, especially if you're a home roaster and you're storing your coffee, like let's say in paper bags or in fruit nets or something like that, you're going to have the smells from other coffees. Then in your coffee, you have a much higher risk of insects that are putting their egg in the coffees, so a much higher risk of pest. And as I said, also the moisture content will change much more if the coffees are in burlap packs. So the coffee can be drier or wetter depending on the environment where you are at. So take care on this. And then the other aspect, besides of the green coffee bean quality, is the aspect of roasting coffee. So maybe the easiest to understand is that you are losing, as you know, weight when you're roasting, so you have the weight loss. And I often say in other videos that the weight loss is correlating with the development of your coffee, but there is actually a but. It's only working well if the coffee then has the same moisture content when you're putting it in the roaster. Because on one hand, you then really have the development of your coffee. You really kind of have this pyrolysis where you're burning particles in the development phase, but especially in the first part of the roast, you have the water that is leaving the beans. So if you're, for example, putting a coffee with 9% of moisture content and one with 12% in the roaster, you have a much higher weight loss in the 12% coffee, because a lot of the weight loss is just coming from the water that is going to be evaporated, and then only the rest is then coming from the pyrolysis. And the moisture content is mainly affecting the roast in the first phase of the roast. So when then the coffee is getting into the so-called Maillard phase, where the coffee then is more or less dry, I mean, you will still have a lot of water bound, which is then being released in first crack. But when you have been gone through the so-called drying phase, then the coffees are a bit more similar in roasting. The biggest effect is then really at the beginning of the roast, where you can maybe imagine, like, for example, let's take bread. So you have a toaster, you have two slices of bread. One is quite moist, one is really dry. You will realize that the dry bread will be heated much faster, maybe even be burned in the same time, where the wet bread is still then not really toasted. So the same will happen with the coffees. If the coffee have more moisture in it, it just needs more time and more energy to dry them, while a coffee with less moisture in it will be much faster through this drying phase. So be more careful when the coffee is drier with the heat application, and or if the coffee has more moisture in it, then give more energy, be a bit more aggressive in the drying phase because the water has to get out of the bean in order then to get into Maillard and development phase. And now we are getting into the second concept. So while, as said, moisture is the amount of water that you have in a product like green coffee beans, then water activity is how much this water is bound in your green coffee beans. So maybe a simple picture to understand: if you have two sponges with the same amount of water inside, one is really fluffy and soft and the other is really is a bit harder, you will realize that it's much easier to press the water out of the soft sponge, while it's harder to press it out of the hard sponge. So the softer sponge will have a higher water activity than the harder one, because here it's more difficult to get the water out of the sponge. If you get a bit more into the theory behind it, then you have a rate of water evaporation. So if you have just normal water, put it in a plate on your table, you will have water molecules that are coming out. There is a pressure being built up, and this pressure is then the reference that you have in the measurement of water activity. So the pressure that you have, if you're just taking clean water, will be 1. And then on the other hand, you will have a product with water inside, and in this product, it can be any food product, you will have water that is bound in the structure, so the pressure is lower. So let's say, for example, when you have a water activity of 0.5, this means that the pressure then from the water that is getting out of this structure or this product is the half of the pressure that you have then in just clear just water. And this is the water activity that you are going to measure. So why is this relevant for you? It's actually theoretically even more relevant than the moisture content. It's just something that hasn't been used in roasting or green coffee trading so far yet, because the devices to measure it have been really expensive and a bit more complicated to use. But this is now changing dramatically, because there are a lot of good tools coming into the market that are cheap and easy to use. So we have now information about how to use it in green coffee trading. This is something where Specialty Coffee Association and also then bigger traders or coffee roasteries have been working with quite for some time. And what we know then here in food safety is that the higher the water activity you have in the bean, the higher there is the risk of having microbes and having then bacteria in the green coffee bean building up. So especially if you are higher than the threshold of 0.78, then you have a really high risk of microbes and bacteria being built up in your green coffee bean, so that your green coffee bean is being mold. Also, when you're then higher than 0.7, this is a range where the Specialty Coffee Association then is saying, so coffee is not specialty anymore, it should be below. And kind of the best practice that we have in coffee trading is we want to be somewhere in the range of 0.5 to 0.6. This is kind of best practice from experience when it comes to coffee quality. So look that you're in this range. The other question that you might ask now is, beside of green coffee trading, what is then happening in the roaster? And here what we can say in general is that water activity is influencing the roast quite a lot. But the point is, especially since these equipment have been quite expensive, it has not been that extensively used. So you will not find a lot of information and personal opinions from roasters on the internet or in books about how water activity influences the roast. There is some information that Chris Corman shares in his book Green Coffee, which is really an awesome book and a book everybody should own, but also on the blog then from Royal Coffee. So you can have a look at this. You will also find some more information if you're Googling then, if you're looking in the internet. But still at the moment, there is not so much information out there. I'm super happy if you have information, if you're using water activity and you have an opinion, or then even kind of more structured data on how it influences your roast profile or your taste profile, then I'm super happy if you share it in the comment. Also, if you know any sources for that, share it in the comment, please, because this is information that we should then share within the community. I'm also very confident that the amount of information here will change dramatically in the future, because now we really have cheap equipment to measure water activity in green coffee beans. So more and more roasteries will start working with this. I hope this helped you to get a understanding of moisture content and water activity, what it is, what in general then is the influence on your operations, especially when it comes to buying and storing green coffee beans, but also to roasting. And if you're now interested in how you can measure this, what tools are around, then have a look at the video that we are going to publish in a couple of days. If it's already online, you find it in the link here. It's going to be super interesting because there is a lot of dynamic in this market, that there are a lot of new tools coming that is going to make measuring moisture and water activity much easier and much cheaper. So have a look at this. And otherwise, if you have any specific questions, if you're looking for equipment for roasting, measurement devices or green coffee beans, or have just any general questions about roasting or green coffee beans, then always come back to me or have a look at our website. You find it online on roasttravels.com.